Hello, everybody. Welcome to our BBA session, DePIN and AI, Bridging the Future. My name is Chris Marzilli. I'm the founder of Mars Rock Web3 Consulting, independent consulting firm. I'm here with Greg and Dan from Akash and Flux, respectively. Before we get into our main presentation tonight, we're going to first just talk a little bit about the mission of the BBA. The Boston Blockchain Association, we have three pillars: to support educational programs, to inspire innovation, and also to empower our ecosystem of blockchain participants. We want to expand this reach, not just inside of Boston, but across New England, the US, and globally. By building our ecosystem, we're expanding our community, which is our most important goal. We'd like to thank all of our sponsors we have here. We have quite a bit of corporate sponsors: Algorand, Deloitte, Ropes and Gray, Fidelity Center for Applied Technology, Meteor Shower, Copper, Mass Technology Collaborative, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, Arrival Bank, Ripple, Aon, Niche, FYEO, Providence, Topsware, True Tickets, and DVLP Medicines. I want to thank you all for helping us sponsor. Keep in mind that the BBA is a nonprofit group, so there's lots of ways that you can get involved. First, you can join as a corporate member, like all of our corporate sponsors I just mentioned before. You can actually join as an individual member. It's very low cost. And you can serve as a volunteer, like myself. If you're interested in working with the BBA, please visit bostonblockchainassociation.com. You can get involved there, see our upcoming events, and also sign up for our newsletter that really is kind of the core of all of our information that we give out. We do have a number of upcoming events I want to make the membership aware of. We have a panel on tokenization and physical assets on October 8th, a cybersecurity panel on October 14th. Our University Blockchain Club competition is November 23rd and 24th. One of our more popular events, our BBA and TAB institutional event, will happen on December 3rd. And of course, we will be planning an end of the year social like we do every year. So please do, again, go to our website, bostonblockchainassociation.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. All right, quick agenda, what we're going to talk about today. First, our membership asked if we could do a quick 5-minute crash course on what is DePIN. So that's where we'll start. I'll be providing some slides and some material to kind of set the stage and help everybody get on the same page about what is DePIN. From there, we're going to go into our expert panel around DePIN and AI. We have two industry experts here today. I'll be asking them some questions, and we'll also go into a portion of the day where we will have question and answer. So in your webinar, you'll see a questions panel. There's a chat panel. Feel free to post information about yourself and where you are and why you're interested. And there's also on the question side, you can start filling that up with questions, and I will try to ask every question we get in there, providing we have enough time. So let's get started. What is DePIN? So DePIN stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. To get to the root of what that means, let's break it down. I'll start with physical infrastructure. When we talk about physical infrastructure in this context, we aren't talking about buildings or roads or sewers. No, we are referring to what we call compute infrastructure. So there's a lot of examples of this, but let me give you a few. It could just simply be servers in a data center, or it could be a desktop, or maybe the laptop you're using to watch this video. It could also be the graphics card or the GPU inside your desktop or laptop. It could be a Raspberry Pi device, or even some of the smart home devices or IP-enabled cameras. Hotspots, like this Helium one pictured here, kind of help build one of the first DePINs. In fact, even your cell phone could be considered infrastructure. Really, any other IoT devices, even like this weather station pictured here. Also not pictured are many other infrastructure things that could be connected to a network, including dash cams, which has become very popular in the DePIN space. So in the context of physical infrastructure, it's really any type of compute power or device that could be networked. So that's that. Maybe we can have the panelists go on mute for a second. Let's talk about decentralized infrastructure. And really, to talk about decentralized infrastructure, I think it's first, you have to understand centralized infrastructure, which is what the dominant mode of infrastructure is today. In centralized infrastructure, So centralized infrastructure is where physical hardware, services, and software is controlled by one centralized party. A great example of this is Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud Compute, which now controls almost 80% of the cloud-based infrastructure market. They own the data centers, they own the hardware, and for the most part, they own and control the services that run in their cloud. Centralized infrastructure is characterized by total control of one party, in this case, a very large corporation. With decentralized infrastructure, each node or individual piece of hardware in the network is controlled by separate parties, most of whom which don't even know each other. They set up their infrastructure in accordance to the guidelines set by the network and ensure everyone is properly serving the network. To put this in more layman's terms, you can think of decentralized infrastructure almost as a crowdsourced type of infrastructure. The people run the infrastructure in the decentralized network, and anyone with the proper hardware can actually participate. Now, the question I typically get at this point is, can decentralized infrastructure truly work? Well, there's actually some historical precedent that not only can it work, but decentralized infrastructure can literally do amazing things. This even goes back before Bitcoin and blockchain was even invented. For example, the Human Genome Project, which started in 1990, had over 3,000 researchers from 20 different countries contributing to infrastructure that successfully mapped all 3 billion base pairs of human DNA, paving the way for significant advancements in medical research and biotechnology. Folding at Home, started in 2000 by Stanford University, is a distributed computing project that simulates protein folding to help researchers understand diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer. In 2020, Folding at Home actually reached the milestone of being the first network to break the exaflop barrier, becoming the most powerful computer in the world. Here's the actual tweet from the Folding at Home team. That's amazing. What's amazing about this is people are contributing their compute infrastructure really out of the goodness of their hearts, without any rewards other than knowing they were helping doing something amazing, like decoding the human genome or finding a cure to cancer. So all of that infrastructure was actually donated. But with blockchain technology, we can easily track and reward those who contribute infrastructure to decentralized networks. So let's take a look a little bit about how that works today. So with DePIN and blockchain, you can look at rewards. Here's a basic DePIN flywheel from a company called IoT Techs that's also in the DePIN space. First, it starts with a DePIN protocol, which founders create. We have two founders on the call today, so I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about this. This protocol will usually initiate a token, right? So that is on the blockchain, and that token will have some sort of value. Through deploying infrastructure, your deployers will actually create the DePIN platform. They'll deploy infrastructure leveraging the protocol created by the founders. Then apps will get created on that platform, typically through third-party developers, or doesn't necessarily have to be. Even the DePIN protocol or even the deployers can create apps. Anybody can create apps on this, which then give utility to end users who pay for that in the token, which then creates a community of end users, DApp creators, DePIN platform deployers, and the protocol itself. And it creates a flywheel event where as people use more of the apps, value gets back into the token, people deploy more infrastructure, more apps get created, and the flywheel goes on and on, increasing the value of the protocol. This model ultimately gives decentralized providers a number of advantages over centralized providers. First off, there's no single point of failure in a decentralized network, making it more resilient. Decentralized networks tend to be cheaper, sometimes by 80% or more compared to centralized provider. With decentralized providers, you don't have to worry about corporate stealing or reuse of your data, or completely being deplatformed from your application just because the centralized service doesn't like the app you've deployed. And lastly, and probably one of the most important things, is that in a DePIN project offers economic incentives in the forms of a crypto token. Anyone can run a node and be compensated, leading to a passive income source in what some have termed the machine economy. Basically, if you have infrastructure, you can contribute to the decentralized network and receive rewards for that. I would, venture to guess that if you went up to Amazon and tried to say, "Hey, I'll run one of your servers and get compensated for it," they tell you, they look at you sideways, and good luck with that. But now, if you have infrastructure, you can contribute. So now that we know decentralized infrastructure can work, the next question I get is, how many DePIN projects are there out there, and what are they doing? Well, you can see this from this graphic from a well-known research firm called HOC, attempts to map out existing DePIN projects. For most of today, I've been talking about general cloud compute, but as you can see, there's a wide range of DePINs that offer a variety of services. Some, like Helium, offer IoT connectivity, but you can also see we have a large number of areas like environmental, where you can see there's WeatherXM, which is one of the images I had earlier. There's storage, and you can get Filecoin, which is a very well-known one. Data is in here as well. CDN, IoT, Helium's right there, VPN, all sorts of other networks, bandwidth, and of course, cloud computing, and last but not least, decentralized GPU computing. And you can see we have both run on Flux and Akash network here. And that leads kind of to our main panel tonight, because when we talk about GPU computing, we have to talk about AI. So we'll get to that in just 1 minute. But first, I just want to quickly mention that, if you want more information about DePIN, a great source is my blog at marsrock.medium.com. And it has some more in-depth understanding of DePIN. It starts out with a 101 article, talks about the demand side and supply side, even does some revenue analysis around what kind of revenue you can generate from these different DePIN networks. All right, so enough from me. I want to bring on our two guests that we have here. First off, we have Greg Usari. Greg, you're the founder of Akash Network. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and also tell us why you built Akash.
Hi, my name is Greg. I'm the co-founder for Akash and CEO for Overclock. Background, being an open source programmer all my life. And before Akash, I was a co-founder of AngelHack, where we helped launch several key Web2 companies, biggest one being Firebase, which got eventually acquired by Google. So my love for open source software really led me to create Akash as a true open source cloud.
Great. Okay, Dan, let's move on to you. Dan, you're the founder of Influx Technologies and the Flux Network. How did you get your start, and why did you build Flux? Yeah.
Quite frankly, I was tired of watching, good projects run into issues with being deplatformed. I worked in healthcare for the better part of 25 years. So as a C-suite in a large healthcare organization, I also worked in nonprofits. And as they continued to grow and they continued to evolve in technology, I started to see a disturbing trend, and that was Google in everything. And it terrified me, because if they're harvesting and utilizing your data, if you are not the custodian of your own personal data and or infrastructure, then it becomes a real significant challenge. So I met in 2017, I met with the other co-founders. We agreed that we were going to build a decentralized compute network, and that's how Flux was born. So right now, Flux has 13,000 nodes all over the globe, thousands of applications deployed on the platform. And as Greg kind of alluded to, we've been down this road before. We've seen the technology space mature and grow, and this was just the next logical piece. For us to truly have a decentralized environment, you have to have a decentralized platform delivery framework that provides that. And it isn't just a one size fits all. You're going to have Akashas, you're going to have Fluxes, you're going to have Filecoin, so on and so forth. So we are finding many opportunities, because a lot of these projects that are quote unquote decentralized and or DePIN and or whatever, they're running on AWS, they're running on Google, they're running on Microsoft. So if one of these guys goes down and your project goes down, you're not decentralized. And that's why essentially what we stepped up to do with other projects is to create that delivery model, that framework to drop in.
Awesome. Great. So thank you both for joining me today. I have a number of questions I want to go over, but first, maybe let's start from the basics. So we just learned about DePIN, but let's start with, why DePIN and AI? How does DePIN and AI currently intersect? Greg, you want to start us off?
Yeah. So if you think about the core essence of DePIN is, number one, it lets, its users access resources that are hard to get, right? One of the core properties why DePIN is important. And today, the most crucial aspect for getting AI is the compute power, the accelerated compute power. And this compute power is distributed across many different companies or individuals, right? So the centralized structures cannot reach the globe. So today we have GPUs, primarily in data centers, but also we're starting to see GPUs in homes, like gaming devices. Then we're going to see GPUs in gaming consoles, right? Or vehicles. There's so much computational power that's simply impossible for a single organization to have access to. That's why you need decentralized networks to aggregate this compute, which is the fuel for AI. Without compute, there is no AI, right? So DePIN is not a sort of a nice thing for AI. It is the core necessity for AI to reach its global potential, which requires global reach. And it's predicted about 5% of global GDP, which is about $5 trillion to $6 trillion worth of spend will happen by 2030, predicted by Gartner, right? And that amount of network cannot be done by a single sort of like company.
Yeah, I like what you said there. DePIN is a core necessity for AI. I assume that's because we're not going to have enough compute to do it. Is that
simply not enough compute? ChatGPT is slow. It takes about 24 H100s to run a production grade, Llama 3.1 405B at FP16 as the most accurate, high quality 24 H100s.
Yeah,
I can serve maybe 50 concurrent users. So two people will need one H100 dedicated to them if we want AI to be like hyper responsive, available every time.
Yeah,
100%.
And not to put you on the spot, but do you know what the current cost is of an H100? If you could even.
The cost is about the actual physical cost is about 30,000. 34K, I think, but I think it's like 30K if you buy wholesale. But even then,
if you can get them,
if you can get them. I think NVIDIA made them about 750K last year, and we got how much? 8 billion people. How the hell are you going to get enough compute if you really want AI to reach its potential, like everybody on the planet? It's not the technology is very capable now, but it cannot reach these masses because the scalability is limited in individual organizations. That's why AI, I cannot see a world where DePIN doesn't accelerate AI.
Yeah. So Dan, kind of same question for you. Where do you see the intersection of DePIN and AI, and maybe you give us some real world use cases?
Here, I'll put this cypherpunk get up one because, and I wore it specifically just to do that. I agree with Greg 100%. It's all about resources, and there is a huge discrepancy between have and have-nots. But I take it a step further because I look at it as a bit more nefarious in the sense that, we have major corporations that are cornering right now as we speak, cornering the market on those compute resources, those valuable compute resources that Greg was mentioning. And I think the reason for that is they want to control the input and the output models. Ultimately, that's why Microsoft partnered with ChatGPT, and you see all this sudden rush to capitalize on what AI is and how it's utilized. Whoever controls the input models controls the output models as well. So we've seen with Google Bard and some of the other projects where they were getting construed input models that were giving you false, almost negative narratives coming out the other side, which is terrifying because AI will input and utilize what you give it. So having a clear, unfettered winner of decentralized AI is absolutely paramount. And, I'm not one of the naysayers that's running around saying that AI is going to end the world. I believe it's going to be an unbelievably powerful tool, but it's going to have to be done in an open source manner. So our truth models match up with what the input models are. So open source, decentralized, publishing the algorithms so that people can see, what's happening is absolutely paramount. And that goes hand in hand with what Greg was saying specifically about the compute resources. If you own the compute resources, you own the input models. And therefore, DePIN becomes unbelievably valuable as it continues to maturate and grow. So I think it's a natural blend. And I would change one part of that question, and is why is decentralized compute absolutely paramount for the development of AI? Because we have to have that truth model. We have to have that open source product. Because if we don't, we'll fall into the same old don't be evil scenario again, where somebody's controlling your input outputs and they're censoring and changing whatever it is that you're getting to. So, I agree with Greg with what he said. I do think, A big part of it is controlling those narratives, and I think that's where DePIN really shines.
Yeah. Greg, anything to add there?
I agree. I mean, biases need to be open. The weights to be open. Without open weights and without biases, there is no, like, there is no way to combat misuse, right? So the biggest scares about regulation right now is, well, they're going to be, AI will be used by bad people, or AI will be like taking over. I think AI is going to accelerate humanity. Like in my life, I have a million things I want to do. I just can't do them because I don't have time. AI buys me time, right? So instead of thinking of like what AI is going to go further, people are, this typically happens with every new generation technology. It happened with, when ATMs came, it happened when the internet came, like it happened, like people are afraid that it's going to replace so many workers, and there are all these like scary, scenarios being through. But in reality, it's going to benefit more than limit, right? And I saw some Waterloo kid building a nuclear reactor from his dorm using AI. I mean, think about what kind of power that is. I mean, imagine the acceleration humanity is going to get. So I think it's going to create new jobs. I think it's going to create more abundance to a point where we don't know what to do with abundance, because the marginal cost of software is going to zero now. Like I can create an app as CEO of a company, right? So it's like when you have such power in your fingertips, I think and that needs to be open source. It needs to belong to people, because in order for that to have the most benefit, it can be locked away in companies, and that's important. So I want truly open AI that anybody can leverage, and of course there are going to be bad actors going to use things for nefarious purposes, but then you're going to have more good actors that going to combat the bad actors if the technology is open. And that's how we need to grow and accelerate, but not like lock away with, because there's a potential non-concrete future threat, right? And threats are going to occur, and when they occur, we need to legislate accordingly to the threat, because you can't stop a whole technology stack. I mean, like that's revolutionary to hold, because you have some future concerns.
Yeah. So I heard some great things there. I really like your statement. AI buys you time. I like that. Some people ask, why is AI good for me? It buys me time. Dan, you had mentioned about, we need to the truth model, and we need to control the inputs. You wrote recently a Forbes article called Future Proofing AI in the Decentralized Cloud. You noted that researchers estimate a global cloud compute AI market size of over 400 billion by 2023. Unfortunately, most of the existing cloud network is inherently centralized, as we talked about, with over 70% of the cloud compute market dominated by just 4 providers. What do you see as the path for DePIN to break this monopoly? You're on mute, Dan. Dan, you're on mute.
Man, and that was so good. I was on the go there. I said there's really two ways of adoption. There's through attrition and there's through necessity. And I think attrition doesn't fit here because it's not fast enough. Historically, that would be your things like maybe cell phone adoption and or telephone landline adoption. But necessity, we're going to see a parabolic move there. And if you're familiar with the adoption curve, the bell curve that goes like this, we're very early on in this, but what you're going to see is this massive influx of adopters as they start to realize the value added. And I do believe that the value comes from not only the relationship it has with AI and DePIN, but really through all the standard technology stacks across the board. Because I think you could see some symbiotic relationships between what was and what will be. And I'm not one that sits there, and I'm pretty sure Greg agrees with me on this and says that we're going to completely remove AWS, Microsoft, Google, and everything with DePIN. Maybe someday, but reality is we have to live together and work together currently. So I think traversing and making the user interfaces rock solid, because if a customer comes to a disruptive technology and the experience is not good, they won't come back. And I think that's what's taken so long for us to develop products, that because we made them look and feel just like you did in Web 2. And that's how you get your adoption curve. So, I mean, if you look at, let's say, look in Africa, landline adoption was on that bell curve was like this, and it never met that exponential growth model. Why? Because the resources were limited. And with AI, with DePIN, with whatever product you want to drop on top of that blockchain infrastructure, it's going to see exactly what mobile phones saw in Africa. That adoption curve went straight parabolic because the infrastructure was wireless. It was easily to deploy. Stood up the towers, got it rolling, and now you're starting to see a lot of people actually utilize that. So I think we're going to continue to see these growth models, and I think it's the old adage is very slowly, then all of a sudden. I think that's exactly what you're going to see, and we've already seen a mad dash to DePIN because the compute resources that Greg was talking about earlier, people have already set CTOs across the globe have sat down and started to think this out and said, you know what? We're not going to have enough compute resources in the future. We cannot scale appropriately. We cannot. Microsoft just bought a nuclear power plant here in Pennsylvania, TMI, right? They're sourcing all the power. They're turning it back on for Microsoft. There's realistically, you're not going to have that for those mid-tier to bottom tier. And then there's a huge discrepancy. So I think as long as we develop that infrastructure out appropriately, so the framework is there, it's just a lift and shift drop from Web 2 to Web 3, I think you'll see DePIN continue to grow exponentially.
So I heard, the key for breaking that monopoly is kind of the necessity that DePIN provides, and you need to have that kind of user experience that will allow people to easily move from Web 2 to Web 3. Greg, what's your thoughts on how we break that monopoly?
I agree. It's the ground game, right? So you gotta come from bottom up, not from top down, because no CTO of a large company is going to go to the team and be like, use Akash or Flux. It has to be team members individually experience Akash and pushing the narrative in the organization from bottom up. So that means you got to reach that's how Linux came about. That's how most disruptive technologies come about. So in order to reach that person, you got to develop delightful interfaces that are, that they like and use and be proud of showing their team members, right? So just imagine, empathize with that user and build accordingly. So there is an aspect of brand, I don't know who said this, but when you have necessity designed for content, when you have surplus designed for taste or something of that nature. So right now, compute, I think, is in surplus because you have Amazons of the world. So you got to develop tasteful interfaces, right, to win. And but when you have GPUs, which are in necessity, you have high demand, you don't have to design such an interface because the fact that you have cheap GPUs, people come because it's a very scarce resource. So what is the right amount of interface is a question, right? So that's always so we're always, I guess, continuously learning from Akash. That happens to be a top priority. How do you really break that barrier of because of activation rates, which are horrible in Web3 across the board. Once we break the barrier, I think then we can scale. I agree with 100% with Dan.
Great. All right, we're starting to get some questions from the audience members, and apparently I didn't do a great job of explaining what is DePIN. So I'm glad we have both of you here. So there's a couple questions. Emily asked, so far the answer to what is DePIN sounds a lot like the answer to what is blockchain. Could one of you maybe take this question on? Can you be more granular about what is DePIN?
So DePIN really is, my definition. It's a decentralized network. That means there's no sort of friction between exchanging value of devices, physical devices in the world, and it could be any sort of device. It could be computational device, it could be camera, it could be that is used to or it could be like a car hood camera that's used to like map the roads. That could be a DePIN. It could be a wireless networks that are just any networkable device, effectively, all coming together, and offering a significantly greater access and a significantly lower cost. Right. In case of Akash, it brings together GPU clusters that are extremely distributed across the globe, so that you can get access to cheaper AI, which is more reachable. Or in most senses, like until last year, Akash was the only place to get on-demand H100s, which are the most highly high density chips made by NVIDIA, right? So in some cases, it's a necessity. So that's what decentralized DePIN networks do.
Yeah. So I think the difference there, when compared to blockchain, is that you have physical resources, where blockchain is more, the tokens, they're digital resources, right? So, Dan, what were you gonna?
There's like new contention now. I think people are fighting over what DePIN definition is. There's at least the VCs are now into DePIN. It's all cool. By the way, Akash and Flux are category creators for DePIN. When they wrote articles about DePIN, it was Akash, Flux, Filecoin. It was Helium, Render, and some of the networks. So it was like this, and now there's like DWIN they're calling, which is a virtual network, and apparently that's what the Akash and storage networks fall under. And there's also like actual physical networks, like physical devices, like Helium being the mobile device, right? Helium is like offloading pretty good amount of like mobile carriers. You can get like, you can actually use DePIN Helium plan on your phone. It's real life, and it's like for $10 a month, which is the cheapest plan in America. $10 a month, you can get a mobile plan on Helium network. It's really cool what they've done. So the physical devices, they're calling them DePIN now. But again, virtual devices, what does that mean? Like compute, like Ethereum has virtual devices. Like how is it different from Ethereum, right? I think what happened with crypto is the original thesis of crypto is DePIN, because that's what like disrupting arcane old industries that are hard to disrupt. Like starting a cloud company today, you need, I don't even know, gazillions amounts of dollars to compute with Amazon, right? So DePINs make it possible. But then somewhere down the line, we got virtualized. We got into NFTs, and we got into smart contracts, and the whole thing became about this new narrative, and we lost the original like thesis as to why DePIN, why decentralization. So DePIN is sort of like this reinforcement of why we're here doing decentralized systems in the first place. So it's like us doing DePIN, we're kind of starving for our own sort of category, where we have NFTs and we have the meme coins of the world. So it's merely a category to remind people why we are here doing what we're doing. So that's what DePIN is in my definition.
I would just expand a little bit on what Greg said, because I think that's important. He hit it right on the head. What's the number one question you get when you start to talk to somebody new about blockchain? What's it do, right? So DePIN actually adds the what it does to the blockchain model. Blockchain, consensus mechanism, transactional validator, final consensus for the network, right? So the whole it's glorious, right? However, the functionality hasn't been built on top of BTC. So products like Flux, Akash, other products that are building on top of that network are using that settlement mechanism. They're using that process. The largest hotel person in the United States is Airbnb. The largest taxi service is Uber. These are predominantly participant-driven applications that are controlled by centralized entities. So what we're doing is we're taking the centralized entity out of that process. So the people that are actually utilizing the network are the ones that are actually the ones that are building, developing, and the consensus model on that network. So it really comes down to this. As Greg mentioned, we got drunk with the bright and shiny. Everybody did, right? We didn't, because we weren't interested in any of that stuff. But what we did, because we continued to build through that, because we knew on the other side of that, we would have to supply the infrastructure and the network to make those items that they were building and distilling truly decentralized. And that's where DePIN really hits home. The financial industry was not an industry that wanted to be disrupted. Let's face it, they just don't like it. Took a very long time to get any level of Bitcoin adoption. We've seen ETFs now. We're seeing major players come into the space. It's an adoption phase. With DePIN, it's not the financial industry. It's every industry, whether it's electronic medical records, supply chain management, whatever it is, you're taking that centralized authority out of that process, out of that business model. You're allowing autonomous organizations, DAOs to run and govern these processes. And really, that's where it hits home. So, overall, it can be a little bit difficult to understand as you're starting to kind of distill all this, because it looks completely different than every other product that's came across blockchain, because it actually does something. So, I would say that's the biggest thing is, and I hope that answered the question that you got.
Yeah. So let's bring it back to AI. I want to hit on some of the things you guys said earlier, talking about controlling the inputs. Greg, what role does you feel DePIN plays in enhancing transparency and accountability of AI data and operations? And why is decentralization important for securing the data needed driven AI applications?
So, if you think about today, the most important, aspect for AI is compute, right? It's resources. And I think it's important to recognize the importance of this resource. It is a public utility, and like any public utility, like air you breathe, like water you drink, it is so fundamental. We need to know how this computational power is distributed, who has this power, and how is this power really utilized? Is there underutilized power, right? Is there power sitting in data centers that is not reaching the people that it needs to reach, like air, like clean air? And that's why, that's why transparency is important to understand the power distribution. And transparency is also important to understand the profit makers in the supply chain, at least to the chip, right? How are these chips coming out? Who is actually, opening? Because that way you can build truly scalable systems when we have that level of transparency. Yes, you're going to have value. The entities that capture value, but that value will be captured by providing an additional premium on this like services. But foundationally, the very exchange of compute of hands, because ultimately, that's what it matters. Everybody's going to have compute, right? How this exchanges hands, if that layer is decentralized and truly decentralized, truly permissionless for interaction of nodes, right? So that leads to greater innovation in the area, and also I think potentially avoid us going to what I like to term as digital feudalism, whereas a few control the most important utility for humanity, and we don't want that.
Dan, do you agree that the decentralization could help reduce what was just termed digital feudalism?
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's some non-negotiables that need to come with these networks. It needs to be open source. It needs to be secure. We need to be able to validate the network's integrity and the data integrity. You need to have scalability, so on-demand scalability. It needs to be private yet transparent at the same time. So like pseudo-anonymous IDs and things come into play. So I think this is a reinvent of the wheel. We are witnessing probably the biggest paradigm shift we've seen ever in the history of compute, because there have always been centralized players that played into this or helped to build these out, whereas now normal everyday people can participate in these projects. I mean, how many companies can you go into a Discord, ask for Greg or ask for Dan, and get real input from both leaders? Like, try doing that to any Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 company. It's just impossible. So this really starts to come back to grassroots. The folks that are building the networks are the ones that are helping develop the networks and curate the networks. And then ultimately we dot all those I's and cross all those T's on all those negotiables that we need to have. So I think it does bring a new set of transparency, a new set of integrity toward compute, because we fell into this kind of, we are the product world where, I always say, if you're looking around and it's for free and you can't figure out what the product is, you're the product. So, what we're trying to do is reevaluate that, put that back into the hands of the people, which, by the way, the people will demand without a doubt. We're already starting to see this now, without a doubt, as they start to understand the importance of their personal data, the fundamental value of their personal data, and how we get government out of the control of our ecosystems. It's huge. And to do that, you remove that centralized entity. So I think it's a paradigm shift. I think we're seeing a completely new technology model laid out in front of us. I think Flux and Akash are some of the ones that are really pioneering this, but goes much deeper than us. You saw that DePIN list. It's quite vibrant. It's quite developed. I just think it's a matter of time till we rip that Band-Aid off and this becomes your new model, so to speak.
Yeah, and leading into that, we have another question from the audience, and they mentioned that I had said that data security was an advantage of DePIN. Maybe you can talk about what it means in the context of blockchain, the difference between data on blockchain and data on a DePIN, and where if it's on a blockchain, it's freely secure. Right, on-chain data is freely viewable and auditable by the general public, but there's ways DePIN could, where data is not necessarily on-chain and can be protected in private. Maybe, Dan, you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the thing that we need to remember is Bitcoin is absolutely the most transparent ledger in the entire world. It's the most audited ledger in the entire world, and it's the most valuable ledger in the entire world. But one thing it's not is secure in the sense that you can have data that rides along that backbone and it's secured. So where DePIN comes into play is it takes the technology stack that was created by Bitcoin, that consensus mechanism, transactional validator, node network, and then it builds on top of that. And it adds privacy and security in by building in end-to-end encryption in every facet of what it does. So if you go back, I believe it was last year when Google went to the Hill and they got grilled, and they asked Amit Patel very specific questions. They said, can you access the user's information? He skirted at the end of it. He said, yes, we can. Can you read their emails? Skirted at the end. Yes, you can. If I'm here and I move over there, or I move over there, can you tell me my location? Skirt. Yes, we can. We take that equation out of it in blockchain right away. We have no access to people's files. We have no access to what they've built or developed. And that's really what it comes down to. We've spent so much time perfecting and honing that privacy and security piece that it does change how we do business. And I think that that's what is going to be expected moving forward. Once, what Steve Jobs said it, he goes, people don't know what they want till you show them. And essentially, people don't know that DePIN is absolutely essential for the future of technology until we have started to show them and showcase some of the things that we can do for it. And we're doing that right now.
Great. Another question here from our audience, Angel, for you, Greg. Wanted to know who the current target audience is of the Akash. Where is the demand coming from, and how are they finding you and then using the Akash network?
Right. So the demand is primarily now from small to medium businesses to very large businesses. So it's a wide range. The largest user for Akash is NVIDIA. Akash is integrated directly into NVIDIA. Brex, for example, you can fine tune a model using Brex on Akash for a fairly low cost on H100s. I would say other important users that are fairly large is Venice AI, which is founded by Eric Voorhees, who's considered one of the incredible people in crypto. And he started an AI company that offers private ChatGPT in the sense it does not read your prompts or store your prompts, and It does not, store anything, period. It's very sensitive resistant. It doesn't filter you. It's a very open version of ChatGPT that actually works compared to Grok, right? So I use that quite a lot for myself when I have any need to read my medical data. And AI is incredible if you input medical data and ask it questions, right? I would use, or if I want to talk anything about gun-related questions, I would not be comfortable giving to ChatGPT because I know they're listening, and I don't want a profile to be created for me based on my chats, which is happening, right? Mm-hmm. So I care about privacy, and I care about, my data not to be misused on me. That's why Venice is my go-to. Venice.ai is incredible. Highly recommend you check it out. That runs on Akash. Right? So these are some of the most important, and several universities. We got, Rochester Institute of Technology, University of Texas, lots of students that are priced out of your current cloud when it comes to launching GPUs. Go for Akash. There was a story recently in Semaphore. It's the first positive story since FTX crash about crypto by a mainstream magazine that talked about how a student in Colombia was actually able to, was looking for A100s, couldn't get them on Amazon, could find them on Akash, and create a company that eventually got acquired by NVIDIA. So it's an incredible story about people's lives being changed in Akash, and I love to see this incredible impact. And where are we getting? It's mostly word of mouth. It's all organic, and we are getting incredible top of the funnel. We do quite a lot of on the ground game, and we're discovering several issues that are sort of like limiting our scale. And once we solve a big challenge today, it tends to be like credit card on, like Dan was saying, it's interfaces. We can make it super simple for Web3. Most of our users right now are pro open source, pro decentralized systems. Do you want to have the mega AI users that may or may not care, but really care about power, really care about that access to like scale? That we need to open up the product to be more capable in terms of friction. No crypto, none of this user interface, right? So as we continue to iterate quite a lot and remove these like barriers, we're getting significantly more adoption from non-decentralized crowd.
Great. And Dan, same question to you. I know Flux offers a lot of different services, not just AI and GPU. Where is Flux seeing the demand coming from?
I gotta agree with Greg. It's the entire gambit. I had a call today with a Fortune 100 company, and then I had 2 calls with mom and pop shops that were looking to tune up their own platforms that they've developed on Flux and Akash. So, I think what it is it's the people that are looking for solutions for major problems, and they're starting to find that. As we're running into these ongoing this data crunch, this compute crunch, I think you're going to see it come from all sides. We see more probably mid-tier to entry-level developers using Flux as well. So they're building their projects out. It's very cost affordable. It's pennies on the dollars compared to AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google. And I think that, that goes into a big play because it's money for any upstart business. And if they can save a massive amount of resources by utilizing a product like Flux or Akash, that's a win right out of the box. So to me, it's mid-tier, much like what Greg was alluding to. And then you have your enterprise businesses that are looking at the landscape. We can't build enough data centers fast enough. We can't develop this quick enough. What are we going to do to supply this demand? Because it's going to be unreal and it's going to be huge. So, yeah, I agreed with Greg on that.
Great. All right. Another question from our audience from Kenrick. And this question's so good. I'm kind of jealous of it. I wish I thought of it. So there's a tendency for systems to centralize over time. How are you measuring the decentralization of compute power, I assume, on your networks? And what controls are being used to incentivize edge power?
So incentivization, you want to go, Greg?
You go first. I keep going first.
Okay, yeah, incentive. So the entire kind of concept of a lot of these DePIN projects is they looked at the very beginning of the project and how they laid it out, and decentralization was at its core. If you have to plan for these pieces or these components to go centralized at some point, then you're not on the right track with your product. And by the way, it's community driven. Bitcoin has no marketing team. It has no head of HR, and it has no, you can go through the entire list. There's nobody that has done that, and Bitcoin has grown by itself. They haven't had to have regulatory bodies that got in there and worked with it. I think that's where the community comes in. You see a lot of DAOs being developed, autonomous organizations that come into play. But it really comes down to the governance models on your platform. Flux has a governance platform called XDAO, which we use for major votes and consensus on the platform. And here's the other thing. If you don't like it and it's not decentralized enough, you fork it and you build the next version that is exactly that, right? So the wonderful thing about blockchain is if I don't agree with how you're doing your business model or how you're developing your platform, you can fork it and you can build your own. And that was a wonderful idea by Satoshi Nakamoto and Bitcoin, because we've seen many forks, including Flux, that have forked the protocol and built their own platform and their own model. So I think what it does is it takes, we've lived in this siloed world where the talking heads, the juggernauts at the top, control how everything flows at the bottom. And the paradigm has shifted. It's going to be the exact opposite. The people that are in the community, working through the community, developing the projects will be the one that drive the initiatives for the project. And let me tell you something, and Greg, I know we'll agree to this. Vibrant communities and interaction from those folks are the ones that will help you be a better founder, it'll help you be a better community, and it'll help you be a better project in the end. So, it's about bringing people in and letting them, if Dan got hit by a bus tomorrow, Flux would go on and the community would keep building it out. And that's the ultimate goal. And as a founder is to get your project to the point where you no longer are valuable to the product, that it's actually got that strategic vision embedded in itself. So, build your project from the ground up decentralized. Look at the facets of the project that need to be reviewed. A perfect, for instance, as we were building out Flux, one of the things that hit us right away was two-factor authentication. So we can build everything we want, but if we're using a centralized two-factor authentication mechanism, well, that's not DePIN. So we had to go out and actually create D2FA, which utilizes the Bitcoin blockchain for two-factor authentication. Doesn't sound like a big lift. It's massive. So these things will continue to morph and migrate and develop. The community will help to give that input model, and we will grow it holistically throughout. And let me tell you something. Other projects will help to influence that as well, because sometimes one particular project is doing something well, the other project will glean that, and they'll grow together. And that's really the wonderful part of what blockchain technology and what DePIN is there's no walls that need to be torn down. They're all torn down to begin with.
Right. So I agree with Dan. I think it's being out there makes you a better leader. Just being generally available, right? And if you were to really decentralize something, there are two aspects. One is the creation of the code, and second is running of the code, right? So creation of the code, in the sense where you are the process of creating the code, where who sets the roadmap, what features get built, who prioritizes, where is the money going in terms of developing the protocol itself, and how is that incentivized? So you have to decentralize from there on to create a truly decentralized network on top of it. In that sense, Akash has about 500 contributors, right? There's on-chain a fund that funds the development of the network, where anyone can write a proposal, and if it's a good enough proposal, there are distributed groups of special interest groups that review these proposals and actually approve for funding. In fact, it's not approval, right? A recommendation for funding. This goes on chain, and the stakers vote on this proposal that usually aligns with the community and these groups' assessment, right? but there's also decoupling of these individual experts and the actual votes. But community tends to listen to the experts. There's an economy that's being created, and that fund is funded by sustainable economic activity in the Akash blockchain. A portion of the fees gets distributed back. Hosting fees goes to this fund to fund. This is a sustainable model. So there's now a sustainable mechanism for new developers to come and say, look, I have this idea to improve Akash, and this is the proposal I'm going to make it. I'm going to put this proposal. If the proposal gets promoted to the cloud standards repo, it can get funding. So I can actually create a business. Now we have enormous amounts of community members. Most of the contributions, 25 people are employed by Overclock Labs, and 90% of these contributors come from Overclock Labs, being the core contributor, come from non-core contributing, authors, right? Which is decentralized. And from a nodes, it really comes down to, yes, there is some aspects of centralization. There are going to be large providers. There are going to be small providers. There are going to be not centralization, some aspects of size in general. But is it centralization though? Well, if centralization means that if this node goes down, can it take down the entire network, right? I don't think so. I think it's fairly distributed in terms of resiliency, and that's been proven over and over. If a big provider goes down, it doesn't take down the whole network. Yeah, you lose a chunk, but the network still, can function. Can that individual change the game? I don't think so, because these providers are not really the contributors that are influencing the vote on the ecosystem in a way, right? So no, not really. Yeah, there is some aspects of larger clusters that are larger in size, but that doesn't lead to centralization. And also the access is permissionless, right? There's fundamentally no one's approval required to use any aspects of Akash blockchain. Like from the user interfaces to voting, to being a validator, to being a provider and a tenant, there's no permission needed. It's a key versus a key. No one can stop you. And the receiver and the peer can reject your transaction, but no one can stop you from sending the transaction and having some peer. So, and that is fundamentally decentralized, right? So I think Akash is fairly decentralized, and look at any attack vector, it has sufficient defenses that are baked into not only the protocol, but how the community has developed over time, and how these voting structures, about 280 proposals on Akash network. I think 40 of them are funding proposals. So read through the funding proposals. There are some rejections, but the approval rate is fairly high. That means there's quite a lot of good ideas coming across and getting funded fairly easily. So it's fascinating.
That's great. This has been an excellent conversation. Unfortunately, we are short on time, so I do want to close it out with one last question for the both of you. Looking ahead, how do you see the relationship between DePIN and AI evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? And what do you think are some of the key challenges that the DePIN industry needs to overcome to be successful in the AI industry?
So a big challenge today is leveraging heterogeneous compute for AI. AI requires homogeneous compute in the sense if you're training on H100s, you got to use H100s across the board. And that are fairly co-located, close to each other, right? So that limits how much distributed compute can be actually leveraged to train a large language model, right? I think that is a core sort of limitation, and that's being solved by fairly quickly. Yesterday we saw a demo. Last week we saw a demo by News Research that talked about published a paper on distro, which I believe is decentralized training over the internet that can leverage clusters, essentially of any size for the most part, to participate in a larger training network. So it could be 4090s, it could be H100s, it could be A100s, whatever you have available. That I think alone will open up the distribution to a point. And then we solve the next challenge, which is verifiability. How do you verify compute that these are giving truth? I think next, I would say 3 years, we're going to unlock this heavy distribution. I think it'll come down to a point, if you look at what XOLabs is doing, they're going and they're, essentially improving every GPU driver support to be compatible for CUDA, right? So you can do like an M1 or a Mac driver support, or heck, there are even like game consoles. I remember US Air Force built a supercomputer not too long ago, I think in 2012 or 2013, using PlayStations.
Yeah.
These are very powerful computers sitting out in your home, this idle. I use my PlayStation maybe once a year, like during Christmas. That's pretty much it, right? So all that compute should be connected. I think that's going to be in the next 5 years. I think I like I said in the beginning of my talk, the session, I don't see a way for AI to be able to reach masses without DePIN, and that's going to be a reality in the next 5 years.
Yeah. So Dan, same question to you. Where do you think DePIN and AI are going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, and where do you see the biggest challenges that we'll have to overcome?
I agree with what Greg said, but I think our challenges are going to come in another way, and that's going to be the regulation of AI across the board, or the attempt to. And I think this is why DePIN becomes unbelievably important to the greater good of developing AI the way that it should be. I think that as any government, especially in the United States, they tend to regulate with a hammer, and they're almost always reactive and not proactive. So I think what you're going to see is a lot of a massive push to regulate AI. You're already starting to see it. People are already starting to talk about it. The concerns are out there. I think it's, like I said earlier, I'm not one of the guys that believes that AI is this ugly thing that's going to destroy humanity. I think it's actually going to be an uplifting piece for humanity if we can get away from the stigma that comes with it. And, but there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of money to be invested in controlling the narrative of AI. So the governments are yet to come into this space and really start to attempt to regulate it. So people like myself and Greg are going to be unbelievably important for championing why decentralization in AI is paramount for us to continue this growth model. So, I think there are, from a technological challenges, Greg hit it right on. I think that we have a lot to do. I also think sharding of data is another one, allowing multiple GPUs to run processing jobs, so you don't have to have the latest and greatest card out there, because as we know, there's varying degrees of AI, there's varying degrees of rendering, so on and so forth. So, and interchain operability, allowing Akash and Flux to work together to provide services that each one of us have really honed and developed well, and then allowing our products to basically serve our customer base across the board. So I think we're really honestly going to see the major hurdle for AI and DePIN coming from a regulatory standpoint. Because let me tell you something, once they figure out that it's on DePIN and they can't take it back, it's going to definitely raise some eyebrows. So, I think it's a great time to be alive to see this happening, but it also is going to be a very challenging time over the next 5 years.
Awesome. Dan, what a great kind of way to sum this up. It's a good, warm vision, but it seems like we have a lot of work ahead of us. So I want to, I went forward, I went backwards, I forward. So I want to thank you both, Greg and Dan, for joining me today. I really do appreciate your time. For those of you who had other questions, feel free to follow these guys on Twitter, or X now it's called. You can find their Discords. Dan is right. They will answer questions on their Discord. I can attest. I talked to Dan on Discord well before we ever met. So thank you very much for both of you. I just want to remind everybody, please visit BostonBlockchainAssociation.com. If you're not already a member, you can sign up there to join the newsletter. You can also, we'd love to have you as a corporate sponsor if you're from a corporation. So thank you very much again to Greg and Dan, and to all the people at the Boston Blockchain Association who helped run this event tonight. Thank you very much, all.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you all. It was wonderful.
Thank you.